The music was too loud, the shots too strong, and the dare far too stupid. But none of that stopped Layla Quinn from climbing into the elevator of the Lexington Grand Hotel at nearly 2 a.m. with a drunken smile on her face and a mission in her heart. "Top floor," her best friend slurred, pressing the button with a giggle. 1 hour, no chickening out. Just crawl into an empty bed and pretend you're someone with zero self-respect. Layla was not the kind of girl who usually accepted dares. She was quiet, practical, and painfully private, the type who color-coded her planner and still slept in cartoon pajamas. But tonight was different. Tonight was a blur of heartbreak and tequila. She had just walked in on her ex-boyfriend of 3 years, kissing another woman in their shared apartment. Apparently, "we're on a break" translated to, "I've already moved on." So when her friends dragged her to a downtown birthday bash, she didn't resist. When the drinks were lined up, she didn't say no, and when the dare came up, she just laughed, like someone who had stopped caring for a night. "Penthouse," she whispered to herself, stumbling out of the elevator. The hallway was silent, carpeted in velvet red and lined with gold wall sconces. She checked the numbers, heart pounding with both adrenaline and alcohol. At the end of the hall, a door stood slightly ajar. No noise, no light. She slipped inside. The suite was massive. Everything screamed wealth. Leather couches, city skyline, champagne chilling in a silver bucket. She ignored it all. Her cheeks burned with embarrassment, but she was already halfway in. The dare was clear. Crawl into the bed. Stay an hour. Leave before sunrise. The bedroom was darker than expected. Moonlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows. The bed was huge, the sheets turned down like it was waiting for someone. She hesitated only for a second before pulling off her dress, folding it over a chair, and slipping beneath the cool, expensive sheets. "This is insane," she thought, but the bed was warm, and the mattress cradled her like a secret. She curled into a ball, closed her eyes, and whispered a shaky laugh. 1 hour, just 1 stupid hour. She never heard the front door open, never saw the man who stepped into the suite. He moved like he owned the world, because he did. Julian Wolfe, billionaire investor, walked into his penthouse expecting silence and solitude. He didn't expect to find a girl asleep in his bed, naked, hair splayed across his pillows like she belonged there. He stared at her, unmoving. Most people would have shouted, called security, demanded answers. Julian simply loosened his tie, exhaled slowly, and walked to the opposite side of the bed. Layla stirred, but didn't wake. He pulled back the sheet, slid in beside her without touching, and lay there with eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. Something about the way she slept, so vulnerable, so unaware, made him feel more alive than the last $10 million deals combined. And that was before she opened her eyes. Layla Quinn had always lived on the edges of life, never the center of attention, never the girl with the loud laugh or the perfect hair. She was quiet, observant, and more comfortable behind a sketchpad than a dance floor. Growing up in a small Pennsylvania town, she'd learned early that the world didn't offer second chances to girls like her. Her mother worked double shifts at a diner, her father had walked out before she turned 10, and Layla had spent her teenage years balancing school and side jobs just to pay for community college textbooks. She didn't complain. She survived. That was enough. At 22, Layla had moved to New York on a scholarship to a local design institute. She shared a 1-bedroom apartment with 2 other girls, took freelance gigs when she could, and rationed every dollar. She was careful with her heart, more careful with her body, and had never trusted easily. Until Devin, her first real boyfriend, her first everything. 3 years wasted on a man who promised permanence but gave her betrayal. Walking in on him kissing a coworker 2 nights ago had shattered something deep. She didn't cry right away. She went silent. Then her friends dragged her to a party. And now, Here she was, in a billionaire's bed, naked. But she didn't know that yet. She awoke slowly, consciousness tugging her upward through layers of warmth and cotton. For a moment, she thought she was in her own bed. Then she smelled the sheets. Not the familiar cheap detergent scent of her apartment, but something richer. Cedar, leather, faint whiskey, masculine. She turned over and froze. There was a man lying next to her. He was facing away, shirtless, broad shoulders rising and falling with each slow breath. His hair was dark, slightly tousled, and even from this angle Layla could see the sharp cut of his jawline. She gasped, bolting upright and grabbing the sheets to cover herself. The motion woke him. Slowly, he turned his head. Their eyes met. Gray, cold, piercing. He didn't look confused. He didn't look angry. He just looked amused. "You're not my usual wake-up call," he said, voice low, smooth like velvet over steel. Layla's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He sat up, stretching lazily. "Don't scream. I hate noise before coffee." She blinked. I thought this was an empty room. I didn't know." Julian Wolfe studied her. Really studied her. Not just the disheveled brown hair or flushed cheeks or the oversized sheet clutched to her chest, but the fear in her voice, the kind that didn't come from being caught, but from being vulnerable. "Who dared you?" he asked calmly. Her face flushed deeper. "It was just a stupid game. I didn't think—" "You clearly didn't," he said, standing and walking toward a sleek black robe. He moved like someone who had never apologized in his life, confident, effortless, dangerous. Layla looked away, only to glance back when he spoke again. "You can keep the sheet," he said, "but get dressed. I want to talk." "Talk?" she repeated, confused. He turned to her then, fully dressed now, arms crossed. "You broke into my penthouse. You slept in my bed. And you're still here. You're lucky I'm not pressing charges." Layla scrambled for her dress, cheeks burning. "I'm sorry. I'll leave. Right now." He didn't move, just watched her pull the fabric over her head with shaking hands. "What's your name?" She paused. "Layla." He nodded once. "I'm Julian." She already knew. Everyone knew the name Julian Wolfe. Billionaire, venture capitalist, silent killer in the finance world. He'd taken bankrupt tech startups and turned them into empires. He had no public romantic attachments, no scandals, no weaknesses, until now. As she rushed to the door, he said one last thing. "Come back tomorrow, 10 a.m. Layla froze. "What?" "I want to talk," he repeated, "about why a girl who clearly doesn't belong in a place like this ended up here." She turned slowly. I didn't mean to." "I know," he said, his voice quiet now, "but you did." And Layla, for reasons she couldn't explain, nodded. Layla didn't sleep that night, not because she was afraid, though fear did curl at the base of her spine like a quiet animal. It was something else, a pull she couldn't name, the look in Julian's eyes when he told her to come back. It wasn't anger, it wasn't lust, it was curiosity, dangerous, hungry curiosity. The next morning, she almost didn't go. She sat on her mattress in the cramped apartment she shared with 2 roommates, staring at her phone as it ticked closer to 10. Every part of her told her to forget it, leave the city, find another design program, disappear. But something made her dress. Nothing fancy. Just jeans, a white t-shirt, and the only pair of clean sneakers she had. She braided her hair to keep her hands from shaking and took the subway to Lexington Avenue. The lobby of Wolfe Tower was nothing like she'd ever seen. Marble, glass, silence. Everything gleamed. Everyone moved fast, dressed in black or gray, holding phones like weapons. She felt like an ink blot in a black and white photograph. The receptionist looked her over once, then nodded. Mr. Wolf is expecting you." That alone nearly made her trip. She was led to the top floor, a private elevator that opened directly into his office. It was more like a museum than a workspace. Steel and glass, a massive desk, floor-to-ceiling windows that made the sky look close enough to touch. Julian stood by the window, hands in his pockets. "You came," he said without turning. "I don't know why," she admitted. He turned then, slow, deliberate. "Because something about last night shook you, same as it did me." She didn't reply. He gestured to a chair across from the desk. She sat, hands folded tightly in her lap. "I'm not here to interrogate you," he said, "but I want to understand." Layla took a breath. "It was a dare, that's all. My friend's birthday. They thought it would be funny. I didn't know anyone lived there. I never meant to invade." "You didn't invade," Julian said. "You exposed." She looked up. "What do you mean?" He walked toward her, slow, every movement calculated. "That room has been empty for 5 years. No one's ever touched that bed, not since." He stopped, eyes flickering. "It doesn't matter." Layla tilted her head. "Why didn't you kick me out?" He leaned against the desk. "Because you looked like you needed to be there more than I needed you gone." Silence stretched. Then he said, "You've never done anything like that before." It wasn't a question. She nodded. "I don't drink. I don't party. I don't even jaywalk." Julian almost smiled. "And yet you ended up naked in my bed." She flushed. "You don't have to keep saying that." "But it's true," he said, eyes locked on hers. "You were vulnerable, unprotected, yet somehow you weren't afraid. Why?" Layla looked away. "Because for a second I didn't feel invisible." That made him pause. "You're not invisible." "Most of the time I am," she said. "But lying there, I felt like I mattered, even if it was just for an hour." Julian watched her carefully. "You matter." The words landed heavier than they should have. He said it like a man who rarely said anything without calculation, but this sounded different. He stepped closer. "You don't know who I am, do you?" "I know your name," she said, "but I don't know your story." Julian sat across from her. "That's the first honest thing anyone said to me in years." From that day on, Layla came back every morning, not for work, not for money, just to talk. They started with coffee, then questions. He asked what scared her. She said failure. She asked what haunted him. He said silence. He asked what her first kiss was like. She said awkward and forgettable. She asked if he ever loved someone. He said once. And then never again. They never touched. Never crossed that line. But the tension was there, unspoken, constant. Julian started changing his schedule to fit her visits. Layla started sketching in his office while he worked. One morning, he looked up from a call and saw her sleeping on the couch, curled up like she belonged. He ended the call early and just watched her. Another time, she brought him lunch. Homemade pasta in a plastic container. He ate every bite. "You're the first person who's fed me without expecting a deal in return," he told her. She smiled. "Then you're welcome." They were orbiting something neither of them could define, until the night it almost broke. Julian had a charity gala. He invited her. No pressure. Just come. She borrowed a dress from a classmate, simple black satin, hair tied back, no makeup, just a little lip gloss. When she stepped into the lobby of the hotel, Julian froze. "You clean up well," he said. She rolled her eyes. "Don't get used to it." They didn't talk much during the event. Too many eyes, too much attention. But every time their gazes met, something passed between them. Toward the end of the night, she slipped away to the balcony. He followed. "You look uncomfortable," he said. "I'm not used to pretending," she replied. He stood beside her. Neither am I. She looked at him. Then why do you do it? He was quiet. Because pretending is easier than being seen. Layla's voice was soft. I see you. He looked at her, really looked, and for the first time he reached out, not to grab, not to possess, just to hold her hand. It was electric, warm, real. No one said a word. They didn't have to. The days after the gala passed like fragments of a dream Layla didn't want to wake from. Her mornings started with coffee in Julian's office, soft conversations that wandered between mundane and meaningful. Afternoons were filled with quiet companionship. She still had freelance work and classes, but somehow he always found a way to fit her into his day. He never touched her beyond that night on the balcony, but his eyes did, constantly, like they were always trying to memorize her face, the shape of her laugh, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when nervous. Layla didn't understand what was happening. Julian Wolfe was a man carved from stone, untouchable, immovable. Yet when he looked at her, he seemed undone. She began noticing things. His hands trembled slightly when he poured coffee. He flinched when a car alarm went off outside the tower. He never let anyone close except her. One Thursday, the elevator stalled on the 42nd floor. A jolt, a flicker, and then nothing. Layla gripped the railing, breath catching. Julian reached for her without hesitation, wrapping an arm around her waist. I've got you, he murmured. I hate small spaces, she whispered. I hate feeling helpless, he replied. They stood in silence until the lights returned and the elevator resumed its ascent. When the doors opened, he didn't let go, not until she looked up at him and said, You're shaking. So was he. Later that evening, they sat across from each other in his living room. The penthouse was dimly lit, warm with the glow of city lights. I want to ask you something, Layla said. Julian nodded. Why me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stood and walked to the bar, poured himself a drink he didn't sip. Do you remember the first thing I said to you? Layla smiled faintly. Something about not being your usual wake-up call. He nodded. What I didn't tell you is that I hadn't slept in that bed since the night my fiancé died. The room stilled. She was in a car accident, he continued. Hit and run. She was on her way to meet me. We'd argued earlier that day. I told her she wasn't enough, that she didn't understand my world. She left angry. She never came back. Layla's throat tightened. Julian, I blamed myself. Still do. He looked at her now, eyes raw. That bed became a shrine to silence. And then you walked in, uninvited, bare, real. He stepped closer. You didn't just lay in that bed. You cracked something open, something I thought I'd buried. Layla's voice shook. You think I replaced her? No, he said gently. I think you made me remember what it feels like to want to live again. They stood a breath apart, silence louder than any confession. Then he added, but I'm not ready to love. Layla looked at him. And I'm not asking you to. He reached up, brushing a strand of hair from her face. But I need you near, even if I don't know what to call it. She closed her eyes. Then don't call it anything. He smiled, soft and fleeting. You're dangerous. I'm nobody, she said quietly. You're the first somebody in a long time, he replied. From that night, they entered a rhythm neither dared define. Layla never moved in, but she was always there. She kept her world small and separate, still taking the train, still cooking her own meals, still attending her design program. But every evening, without fail, she returned to him, sometimes to talk, sometimes to sit in silence. Once, he fell asleep with his head in her lap while she read Neruda aloud. She didn't wake him. Another time, she left a sketch on his desk, him standing at the window, shadows across his jaw, loneliness captured in ink. He framed it. They didn't kiss, they didn't sleep together, but their intimacy was undeniable. Then came the envelope. Layla found it slipped under her apartment door. No name, no return address. Inside was a glossy photograph her, stepping out of Julian's penthouse, hair messy, shirt borrowed, a timestamp in the corner, and a note. "You're not fooling anyone. He always trades up." Her hands trembled. She didn't tell Julian, not that night, not the next, but her eyes gave her away. He noticed. "Something's wrong," he said quietly. She shook her head. "Nothing. Don't lie to me." So she told him about the photo, the note. Julian didn't speak for a long moment. Then he said, "It's starting." "What is?" "The whispers, the digging. They do this every time I get too close to anyone." Layla felt the chill creep in. "What happens now?" He looked at her. "Now I protect you." "I don't need protection." "Yes," he said softly. "You do. Because I didn't see it coming. And that's on me." The next morning, her name was on a gossip blog. No headline, just an anonymous submission. "The girl who broke into a billionaire's bed. Is he finally losing control?" Layla stared at the screen, her coffee untouched. Julian pulled the article offline within hours. His legal team moved fast, but the damage was done. People whispered. Her classmates stared. Her professors stopped calling on her. Layla stopped going to class, stopped drawing, stopped visiting him. Julian sent messages, called, waited outside her building. She didn't respond until the 7th night, when she found him sitting on the curb near her apartment. No driver, no suit, just Julian, real, tired. She sat beside him. "I thought you left," he said. "I did," she replied, "but only because I didn't know who I was anymore." He looked at her. "You're Layla, the girl who dared to lie in my bed like she belonged. The girl who never once asked for anything. The girl who made me feel." She blinked fast. "I didn't mean to change you." He reached for her hand. "You didn't change me. You reminded me that I still could." Silence fell, soft, warm. She asked, "What do we do now?" He exhaled. "We stop pretending this isn't something." Layla nodded. "I'm scared," she whispered. "So am I," he said. And then, for the first time, they kissed. Slow, careful, unapologetic. A beginning built on everything they were afraid to lose. The kiss changed everything, not because it was dramatic or passionate or cinematic. It was the opposite, quiet, intentional, almost fragile, as if both of them were holding their breath, afraid the moment would shatter if they moved too fast. Julian pulled back first, but only slightly, his forehead resting against hers, his breath warm and shallow. "I've thought about this," he murmured. "So have I," Layla whispered. "But I didn't think it would feel like this." He tilted his head just enough to look into her eyes. "Like what?" "Like a decision I'll never be able to undo." His hand slipped down to her waist. "Then don't undo it." She didn't. That night, she didn't go home. They returned to the penthouse together, not saying much, but speaking through the silence in a way only they understood. The suite was dim, familiar now, no longer a place of intimidation, but one that knew her scent, her presence, the sound of her laughter. She stood by the window as he loosened his tie, watching the city glitter below them like fallen stars. "You still haven't asked me to stay," she said. Julian looked over, slow and steady. "Because I was waiting for you to want to." "I never wanted to leave," she replied. He stepped behind her, close but not touching. "Then don't." Her body tensed, not from fear but anticipation. She had never done this. Never crossed the boundary from curiosity to intimacy. But tonight, it wasn't about proving anything. It was about allowing something. Allowing herself to feel. allowing herself to trust. Julian reached for her slowly, his fingers brushing her arm with the gentleness of someone who knew he was holding something breakable. She turned to face him, her breath shallow, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for the collar of his shirt. "I don't know what I'm doing," she said, half laughing. He stilled her hands with his. "Neither do I, but we'll figure it out together." That was the permission she needed. They moved in sync, not with urgency but with reverence. Each button undone, each layer shed, not as conquest but as communion. When he kissed her again, it was slower this time, deeper, more deliberate, like he was memorizing her mouth. When his hand found the small of her back, she didn't flinch. She leaned in. When her shirt fell away, she didn't hide. She looked him in the eye. "I know," he said gently. "I won't rush." She smiled faintly. "I'm not afraid of the pain. I'm afraid of what happens after." Julian pressed a kiss to her forehead. "After, you'll still be Layla, and I'll still be me, but maybe a version that's finally learning to feel again." They didn't rush. They undressed slowly, unpeeling tension with every touch, every breath, every look. Layla touched his chest with tentative fingers, as if mapping out a place she wasn't sure she had the right to explore. He traced her jaw like she was a sketch he'd never finish. When their bodies finally met, it wasn't perfect. It was hesitant and raw and real. She gasped at the closeness, not just physically, but emotionally. No barrier, no defense, just her and him and the gravity of something too big to name. He moved with care, with patience, with something bordering on reverence, and when she whispered his name, not from pain, not from fear, but from trust, he closed his eyes just for a moment to hold the sound. Later, wrapped in sheets tangled from their quiet chaos, they lay side by side. Layla rested her head on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek. "I didn't expect it to be like that," she said softly. "Like what?" "Like being seen and touched at the same time." Julian ran his fingers through her hair. "That's because no one ever bothered to earn both." "You did," she murmured. "So did you." He didn't sleep. Not at first. He stayed awake long enough to watch her fall into dreams, her hand still curled over his heart. He thought about the first night she appeared in his bed, uninvited, and how strange it was that the girl who arrived by accident now felt like the only thing that belonged. Over the next few days, something shifted, not just between them, but around them. Julian canceled 2 international trips, delegated meetings, chose her over the empire for once. Layla moved through the world softer, but more solid. She smiled more, doubted less, until the storm came. It started with a headline. "From dare to mistress, billionaire Julian Wolfe and the virgin who stole his heart, and maybe his mind." Layla stared at the article, her stomach twisting. Her name wasn't mentioned, but the photo was clear. Her stepping into his car, her walking beside him, laughing, unaware of the camera, and worse screenshots of her private art page, her sketches. The one she drew of Julian, exposed. Julian's team moved fast again, but this time the blog wouldn't take it down. They had sources, anonymous quotes claiming she seduced him, that he was losing control, that she was manipulating the man who never fell. Layla shut down her website, deleted her social media, stopped returning calls. Julian found her curled on his couch, knees to her chest. "It's not true," he said. She didn't look at him. "Doesn't have to be. They believe it anyway. I'll fix it. You can't fix the way people look at me now. Then let them look. I don't care." "I do." Her voice cracked. "Because I didn't want to be your scandal." He kneeled in front of her. "You're not." "Then what am I?" she whispered. He didn't answer right away. Instead, He took her face in both hands, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. You're the only person in this world who made me want to be better, and I'm not letting them take that away. So what do we do? She asked. We stop hiding, he said. We stop pretending that this is temporary. She swallowed. Then say it. I love you, he said, and not because you ended up in my bed, but because you made me want to leave the bed and live again. She leaned into him, eyes full of disbelief and something deeper. I love you too, she whispered, but I don't know how to protect this. We protect each other, he said. That's how. And when he kissed her again, it wasn't fragile anymore. It was a vow. It didn't take long for everything to fall apart. The media frenzy escalated faster than Julian's team could contain it. News outlets dug into Layla's past, her scholarship records, her part-time jobs, even her family's financial history. Headlines used words like gold digger and accidental heiress. Layla's professors pulled her aside, suggesting she withdraw until the attention faded. Her classmates stopped looking her in the eye. Stores near her apartment whispered when she walked in. The girl who had once been invisible now felt dissected, judged, unwanted. Julian tried to shield her. He tightened his legal grip on the press, launched privacy lawsuits, and even offered to move her into another city until it passed. But Layla refused to run, until the rumors began affecting him. His board raised concerns. Investors threatened to pull out. One executive asked outright if Julian had gone soft. Julian silenced him with a look, but the damage echoed. One evening, Layla stood on the balcony of the penthouse, arms wrapped around herself. The city stretched out below, glittering and heartless. Julian stepped behind her. We'll get through this, he said. She shook her head. You're losing everything you built. It's just money. It's not, she said, turning to face him. It's your life, and I don't want to be the thing that ruins it. He reached for her hands. You're the only part of my life that makes sense. Her voice was quiet. Then why does it feel like we're holding our breath? Julian didn't answer, because she was right. Every day since the article dropped felt like walking on glass, and she saw it, no matter how hard he tried to hide it. That night, Layla packed a small bag, just a few things, enough to disappear. She left a note on the kitchen counter, no explanations, just 3 words. I'm so sorry. When Julian woke and found it, something inside him cracked open. Not the part that knew how to fight back or strategize or negotiate, the part he had built walls around for years. He didn't call his team. He didn't call security. He drove himself across the city, visiting every bookstore, cafe, and art supply store he remembered her mentioning. He didn't find her. Days passed. The media moved on, but Julian didn't. Not inside. His penthouse felt hollow, his bed untouched. His shirts hung perfectly pressed, but he hadn't worn anything but black in a week. He started carrying her sketch in his briefcase, a copy folded and worn. One rainy Thursday, he received a package. No return address. Inside was the necklace he had given her, silver, simple, with a single tiny star. Beneath it, a note. This was yours before me. It shouldn't remind you of pain. That night, Julian walked into his office and told his assistant to cancel everything. Indefinitely. Are you stepping down? She asked. He paused. I'm stepping into something I should have chosen a long time ago. A week later, Layla sat on the porch of her aunt's house in Maine. A book in her lap, her hair pulled into a loose braid. She hadn't heard from Julian, hadn't expected to, but she still looked at her phone every night, just in case. That afternoon, a black car pulled into the gravel driveway. She didn't move, not until she saw him. Julian stepped out, no suit, no tie, no entourage, just him. He looked tired and real, and hers. "How did you find me?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. "You left your birthday marked on my calendar," he said. "And I figured, if you didn't want to be found, you wouldn't have done that." She smiled faintly, tears stinging her eyes. "You gave everything up." He stepped closer. "Not everything, just the things that never really mattered." She stood. "Why are you here?" Julian didn't hesitate. "Because I loved you when you were naked in my bed, without knowing who I was. And I love you more now that you've walked away knowing exactly who I am." She stared at him, heart racing. "I was never supposed to matter this much." "You were never supposed to be a dare," he said, "but you became my truth." The wind tugged at her hair. The book slipped from her fingers and landed on the steps. "What now?" she whispered. He reached for her hand. "Now I stop pretending I know how to do this perfectly, and I start showing up anyway." Layla stepped into his arms. "Then don't leave." "I won't," he said. And this time, she believed him. 3 months later, the world had moved on. The headlines faded. The whispers died, and Julian Wolfe reappeared in the business world with a quiet fire in his eyes and something softer in his voice. He didn't apologize for stepping away. He didn't explain his absence. He simply returned with Layla at his side, not as a statement, not as a scandal, but as a truth he no longer cared to hide. She no longer lived in shadows. She walked beside him through boardrooms, charity events, and art galleries, her head high, her eyes steady. The girl who once felt invisible had become the woman who anchored a man the world thought unshakable. She didn't change herself to fit his world. He adjusted his to make room for hers. On the 6-month anniversary of the night she lost that dare, Julian took her back to the same hotel, same elevator, same penthouse, but this time the bed wasn't empty. It was made for 2, and on the pillow was a single envelope. Inside, not a marriage certificate, just a note. "I never believed in accidents. Until you." She turned to him, laughing softly. "This is where it started." Julian kissed her shoulder. "No, this is where I began." They lay there side by side, the city glowing beyond the windows, and it wasn't about wealth or image or lust anymore. It was about the way she looked at him like he was just a man, and the way he held her like she was the only thing he'd ever truly earned. They didn't need to say forever. What they had was more honest than vows, more permanent than signatures. They had survived the noise. They had chosen each other when it wasn't convenient. And they had learned that sometimes it's not the mistakes we make that define us, but the courage to stay when things get hard. As the night deepened and the silence wrapped around them like a promise, Layla whispered the words that started it all. "I still can't believe one stupid dare led me here." Julian smiled against her skin. "Sometimes the wrong bed leads you to the right person." And in that moment, they both knew the truth. Some stories don't begin with fairy tales. They begin with chaos, with vulnerability, with a naked heart in the wrong place at the right time. And those, more than anything, are the stories worth keeping.